Good Wednesday afternoon, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and welcome to the I Love CVille Show. Thank you kindly for joining us. A beautiful and gorgeous day to be alive. We're live across Charlottesville, the Commonwealth, the country, and the world on the I Love CVille Network. We're presented by Dr. Scott Wagner. Scott Wagner, Integrated Medicine. Dr. Wagner, changing people's lives at Scott Wagner Integrated Medicine. He absolutely has your back. And folks, the good people at Ting Fiber Internet power this network. Ting Fiber Internet, crazy fast internet, the best in Charlottesville and Central Virginia, and it's not even close. Folks, look at the offer we have in the comments section for Ting Fiber Internet, the best deal on Ting humanly possible. A lot to cover on today's program, including a planning commission vote from last night in regards to more density north of town in Albemarle County, Forest Lakes, Holly Mead area. We will recap that vote for you. We talked with Scott Elliff of the Forest Lakes Homeowners Association yesterday. I need to dot the I's and cross the T's on that story. Folks, I'm going to give you the downtown mall beer garden business model. We've been woodpecker-like persistent with this topic. This idea goes to City Council on Monday. This is what they're going to hear on Monday. We're going to kind of take a look into the future on the I Love CVille Show. Vita Nova, we broke some news yesterday, is going to move from one side of the mall to the other side of the mall, where they will replace Impeccable Pig, a retail outlet that went out of business, frankly, due to COVID. I think it was heading that way before COVID even hit, frankly, because the rents are so high downtown. Now Vita Nova gets kind of an end cap corner unit with tremendous brand exposure. I'm hearing some things of the livery stable. I've reached out to ownership, got contacts in the back of the house. Livery stable, a downtown mall watering hole of tremendous proportions, rebranding as early as Monday. So a lot to cover. Folks, let's go to the Forest Lakes topic first. Again, yesterday, Scott Elliff sitting right next to me to talk about Forest Lakes Homeowners Association and the Holly Mead Homeowners Association. They spent roughly $20,000 combined, the Holly Mead Homeowners Association, the Forest Lakes Homeowners Association, to do a lobbying campaign to oppose more residential development north of town in Albemarle County. Yesterday, it went before the Planning Commission. 6-1, the Planning Commission voted in favor of this development. 75% of the development is affordable housing for 30 years. I'll repeat that statistic. 75% of this development, affordable housing proffered for 30 years. So if you're a fan of affordable housing, and we want all of us to have a slice of the American dream, here's an opportunity for that to come to market. Now, here's what's next. This is going to go to the Board of Supervisors. The Albemarle County Board of Supervisors is made up of 6 people. It's going to need a 4-2 vote to become a reality. A 3-3 vote tie means it does not come to fruition. I said yesterday with Scott Elliff that I expected, if it did go to the Board of Supervisors, that 4-2 was going to be how it was going to play out. Time is going to tell, but this is going to happen this summer. 6 people in Albemarle are going to determine a massive development in northern Albemarle County. We will follow it very closely here on the I Love CVille Show. Next item of business is a downtown beer garden that we have been championing for nearly 2 years on this network. Here's the nitty-gritty. You got a downtown mall with a vacancy rate of 20%. You need to get people downtown. If you get people downtown, Kevin Costner said it best at Field of Dreams, if you build it, they will come. We can't just say it's downtown Charlottesville and expect people to come anymore. Competition is way too great. We have to think innovatively. How we think innovatively is this open container beer garden concept. City Hall puts 2 $15 employees in the heart of the mall, right across from Zocalo and Central Place. These $15 an hour employees sell a wristband and a plastic cup for $5. This wristband and plastic cup for $5 allows people to go from the pavilion to the ice park, soon to be the Code Building, drinking beverages, local beers, local wine, local ciders, local cocktails. They sell the wristband for $5 a pop. From my projections, and this is a small business entrepreneur that has to do projections every day before doing anything, because that's how you survive as a small business entrepreneur, I think you can do 5,000 people a week. 5,000 people a week at $5 a band, is $25,000 a week in gross revenue. 25K times 47 weeks. We're going to say 5 weeks a year. This is not a reality because of inclement weather, cold, whatever you want to call it. 25,000 times 47 weeks a year. This concept just generated $1,175,000 of incremental revenue. The best kind of revenue is incremental revenue for the city of Charlottesville. $1,175,000. Folks, that's the easy money or the short money. The big or real money is getting people downtown and the city getting the back end meals tax revenue. That's the margin. That's the fat payday. So you get the money on the front end, $1,175,000. You get the money on the back end, the meals tax revenue. Let's not forget the hotel and occupancy tax revenue with people drinking on the mall. They're probably going to be, if they're tourists, staying in a hotel somewhere. This is, for lack of better phrase, a brilliant idea. On Monday, it heads to City Council, where 5 people in the city of Charlottesville will hear this concept. We will keep you posted on this. 2 more items out of the notebook before we welcome Deandra Mcdonald and Quinton Beckham to the show. Vita Nova, as we first told you yesterday, is leaving its current location on the downtown mall and going across the mall to the Impeccable Pig location. Remodeling is literally happening as we speak. Vita Nova is family owned and locally owned. The pizza is bona fide. Okay? With this Impeccable Pig location, they have, for lack of a better phrase, a corner unit, an end cap unit, if you may, that's going to offer them tremendous brand exposure and a walkability factor that's better than they have right now. So Vita Nova moving across the mall to the old Impeccable Pig location. One more item out of the notebook. You will see folks, if you haven't noticed, we originate news here on this network, and the rookies is not the right word. The folks that are fresh out of college, that are working for traditional media, that may not have the connections we have in the community, are watching the show and then sourcing the material for the 6 p.m., 10 p.m., and 11 o'clock news and the stuff that shows up in print. Vita Nova will be in print. The beer garden concept is going to be in print. This item is about to be in print too, just like the collagen story we told you about over the weekend. The livery stable, I'm hearing through multiple sources, is going through a rebranding right now. And as early as Monday, the livery stable could be rebranded the Fancy Ramekin. I'm reaching out to Ian, the owner of the livery stable now, to see if he'll come on the program. His first response was, "Whoa, you're a connected dude." We'll wait for the rest of the response from Ian, who's A-plus people. I remember playing foosball with this gentleman about 15 years ago at the Lazy Parrot Grill. A-plus guy. So the livery stable going through a rebranding literally as we speak. All right, Judah Whitcower, let's go to the studio camera. And here with the studio camera, we will welcome 2 people that I think need absolutely no introduction. Ladies first. So we're going to go to Deandra Mcdonald. The beautiful, the talented, the intelligent Deandra Mcdonald. Hello.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm doing good. I'm excited.
It's great to have you. Quinton Beckham put a phenomenal roundtable together on Real Talk. Had Deandra and Nikki Chambliss on the set. And I was like, oh my God, these people are badass. They're rock stars.
All I had to do is show up.
No, you did a hell of a job moderating. And I wanted to do this again. First, let's compliment the handsome Quinton Beckham on this shirt. Will you stand up so we can see the shirt? There we
so
go.
Fancy.
I mean, isn't that nice, Deandra?
I love it.
Look at that shirt.
It's a summer shirt.
I love it, dude. I really do love it. You know, I sincerely mean this. And I love this guy quite a bit, Quinton Beckham. All right, so why don't we do this? 3 people, having some coffee, shooting, you know what, talking about real estate.
You're the only one with coffee.
Fair.
Okay, sorry. Should we go over there? You can get your tea if you want. You got your honest tea. Should we get the tea?
That's true. I'll grab it if I get dried
If you
out.
get a little parched?
Yeah.
Okay, so why don't we do this? I'm going to get out of your way, introduce everyone to what you do, who you are, and what's in the portfolio.
Absolutely. So my name is Deandra Mcdonald, like Jerry said. I'm a real estate investor in Charlottesville. Well, the better way to say is I started in Charlottesville. I've now expanded to 3 different states. I am primarily a buy and hold investor, but I'm switching mostly to flipping so I can pay off some of this debt because I'm tired of having student loans. And I guess I was brought on to talk about what it's like if you're not connected, if you can make money. Because Jerry just went through all of these things of how connected he is, and I'm like, oh, really? That's happening? As I operate in my own little corner. So I think I'm here to talk. I'm the rookie, as he said earlier.
Definitely not the rookie.
I'm the rookie Here to give you some rookie insights of how you can get started in the business.
And QB, how about an intro with you?
Oh gosh, I own Keller Williams Alliance and am their principal broker, along with some other investors. Also a partner in Realty Partners, Ally Property Management, and Closure Title and Settlement. And I met Deandra on her first home purchase.
That's right.
Was her agent for that way back in the day, and we've been together ever since.
So when I tell you I'm the rookie, it's for real.
She's not the rookie. One of the things that really appealed to me was how you manage risk and how you're leveling up. You're leveling up with this hotel that you converted to, is it micro studios? Is that a good characterization?
So it was a motel.
Okay,
So
motel.
the conversion was more the like zoning, being allowed to have long-term residents instead of short-term rental properties. But it's just pretty much a motel. If you walk in, you're like, yep, this is a motel. This is what motel looks like. But I love them because they are micro studios. They're studios or one-bedroom apartments that are crazy affordable, very cheap on my end, easy to maintain. And I know we're going to talk a little later about what I look for in apartments, because that is the key. That is the golden standard for me, are converted motels.
Okay. How, I believe you had a hand in this purchase, or you put it on the radar. Is that what happened here?
Oh gosh, she does a lot of her own searching and hunting and pecking, and so frequently what happens is she's like, hey, I've got this and this, let's go take a look. And, myself or somebody else goes out with her and takes a look, and she's got a whole research system down, and it works really easily for us. We're helping negotiate the contracting, the seller financing, and some of the legal stuff, but she has her own sort of system for what works, what's the right kind of money, and how does that look on a spreadsheet that feels safe and within my risk profile, which is a fancy way for saying not keeping me awake at night.
That's right.
Yeah.
So the feedback I got from the roundtable the most, everyone found the content compelling, but was the concept of seller and owner financing. Seller and owner financing is not a part of everyone's everyday vernacular. So perhaps we start there, and then we can start unpacking of how you can utilize seller financing to level up without having to give your firstborn to a banker.
That's right.
Right? And give them every single tax return commercial, dude, you're giving tax returns for like 5 years. And I have had to, it's pretty,
It can be a little intense.
Yeah.
I think it starts with the kind of property we're talking about. So let's suppose you have a 1970s motel
Yeah.
that's in a space that doesn't.
Is this what we're talking here?
I'm making some of this up.
Okay.
So don't say this is her property, but let's suppose you have a 1970s motel that's in a space that doesn't need a motel anymore.
Yeah.
The person owning it has a lot of their value in the building and can't get that value back out under the current finance structure because you can't prove a market for a motel. How are you going to sell a motel to a bank to put a loan on it when there's now a 185-room Courtyard Marriott 3 doors down,
Sure.
and it's not a highway anymore, it's a 4-lane road with stop signs, and it's just not motel character anymore.
Sure.
So they still want to get some value out of it. They can't get another loan. They've got all of this value in the building that is no longer accessible. So then you have somebody come in with a unique idea. So they come in, they check it out, it's in pretty decent shape, it's not sliding off the foundation, all the plumbing works. They're checking it out, and so they make a deal with the owner that says, look, you can't get financing on this, and frankly, I can't either because it's still a motel.
That's right.
So what I'm going to do is take a chunk of money. If it was like a $300,000 purchase, you might be offering somewhere from 25 to 60 grand.
Okay.
I'm going to give you a chunk of money up front. We're going to go through the whole closing process. You're going to let me inspect it. If I'm happy, we close the deal. That chunk of money goes into your bank account, pays title fees, the taxes for grantors, pays real estate agents, and they still walk away with some cash in their pocket. They're not hit with the huge capital gains because they've gotten a chunk.
Right.
Not the entire glut all at once. And then you agree in a trust deed for a mortgage that the seller holds the lien to.
There we go.
And so then she makes a payment at an agreed upon monthly rate with an agreed upon APR. Usually
APR?
A percentage rate like you would have on any other mortgage.
Interest rate.
Right.
Yeah.
For seller financing, you're a little bit higher than what you would get if you're doing traditional financing because an
Although that's
individual,
negotiable.
everything's negotiable.
That's right.
Up to and including firstborn children and pizza and everything else. I'd rather have the pizza. And then you spread that over 30 years, just like you would a regular one, but you cut it at 3 or 5 years. So now she's got 3 to 5 years to do what she's going to do with the property, make the payments, and at the end of that 3 to 5 years, either has to flip it and resell it at a greater value to make a profit, or have it set up in a way where it is an active business that you can prove to a bank and turn that into a mortgage that pays off the seller.
Okay, so that's a great description. Fantastic description.
It's also a trust deed, so it's a very different experience for the seller with a lot less hassle.
That's right.
If she misses a payment.
That's right. Well, I mean, if the seller misses a payment, and I'm going to get you in the mix here. If the buyer misses a payment, if I miss a payment on one of my seller fi deals, the seller just takes the property back from me, keeps all the money I've given them to that point, and can choose to resell the property and or maintain the leases that I have in play and keep the revenue that's coming from the leases. So I've done 13 deals myself, wrapped myself, in the last 5 years. 10 of the 13 have been seller finance deals.
That's awesome.
I want to do the mechanics of what I've done, but before I do, get you in the mix on some of the mechanics of the deals you've done.
Yeah. So with seller financing, one of the reasons I was so drawn to it is everything Quinton said, but also because I like to keep money in people's pockets instead of institutions' pockets. So why this is really beneficial is because all the seller financing deals I have done, the seller has owned the property outright, or the down payment was able to clear whatever they had remaining. So the first property I did, the seller owned it outright.
That makes it easier.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because if they still have a lien on the property, you have to get permission from whoever that lien holder is. And sometimes they'll say yes, but odds are they'll say no.
Right.
Because they don't want to have all these secondary, tertiary liens against the property. So having someone own it free and clear, and this is really big when I talk to my clients, if mom passed on a property to you, right? You got a property inheritance, it's been in the family, they own it outright. We can make money without selling it. We don't have to give up everything you have on the table today. We can do a rent to own, or we can do a seller financing option where you can get some money in your pocket, but also hold on to your asset. So with these deals, if they own it outright, it's like the negotiation's a little simpler because we're not trying to clear anything. This last one, it had to be a very specific number because he
they
had
clear
to
the debt.
clear the rest of the debt so
Yeah.
that he did get the title so that then he could then pass the title on to me.
Because if they don't clear the debt, and help me with the exact language here, if you don't clear the debt of what the seller has with, say, like a bank, then it's very difficult for that seller to be first on the note.
Yeah.
Okay.
My disclaimer being that I'm not an attorney, so attorneys hold the trust deeds, seek
you're very
legal
smart.
advice. Yes. In order to do seller financing, you're really passing ownership to her, the buyer.
Right.
And I can't do that on a clear title if there's any other debt as a seller, because the first person on the note, because you go in order, is any taxes you owe. Second person on the note would be your original mortgage.
Bank, the financier.
The bank is not going to let you pass title to her that has no responsibility to the bank.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So when doing these seller financing deals, it's important to ask the question, and I'm going to get out of your way, how much do you owe on this property? Because what you owe on the property, you're often going to have to clear that debt. The second thing to consider is you're going to have a tremendous amount of not a tremendous, depends on the deal, you're going to have closing costs, attorney costs associated with it. And no seller's going to want to take money out of pocket. So you're going to have to come up with the money to clear the debt and the money to cover their closing, attorney costs, et cetera, et cetera. So when they're done, they're like, oh, I just get this payment every month from Deandra, from Jerry, and I don't have the capital gains exposure moving forward, and I can budget this money with my retirement over the term. And we'll get to the term here in a matter of moments. Deandra, the show is yours. Jump in here.
I also want to add, it's a protective thing for you too. Because when I make my payments to my sellers, or I guess my seller financiers who own the property outright, I don't care, once they cash a check, I don't care what they do with it. But if there was someone else they were supposed to be paying, I can get into a little sticky of a situation if they're taking my money and not paying their first mortgage or their home equity line of credit or anyone else who can take that. If they're not paying the taxes, like I take on all that responsibility because I would personally hate to, I've paid all this money and you didn't pay your tax bill for 3 years and I had no idea because it wasn't in my name. I had no control over that. So there's a protective aspect for you as a buyer as well, for the seller to own it outright so that you can take control on your end. And I personally send my seller like, hey, by the way, just pay the taxes so you don't have to worry about them stealing your property either from me because I did the wrong thing. But yes, you have to give them, you got to make it attractive to them. And it's not always money. We've said this a few times. It's not always large lump sums at the beginning. Sometimes it's like, this is how we minimize your taxes. This is how I can just make your life less stressful. The buildings I bought did come with people. And one of the reasons he was trying to sell, they did. Okay. And one of the reasons he was trying to sell is because he was just tired of the people. He was tired of fighting. He didn't want to be there. He just didn't have that energy anymore. So it wasn't that he needed the cash. He just didn't want the responsibility anymore. And I'm almost positive, if I go back to, I have a 3-year term on my most recent one, I am almost positive if I go back at the end of those 3 years and say, let's extend, you'll be like, I'm consistently be getting a check. I would love to. Yes.
I love it. I love it. Quinton, jump in here.
I just think, as she's pointing out to everybody, this is a sale just like any other sale you would do. All that is the same. It's this financing and title piece that we just pull out one piece of the puzzle and put in a different one. And often folks get anxious or confused about that because they're so used to the traditional system of how you purchase things. But this does happen frequently. It happens frequently, and it's of great use for the kinds of buildings that we're talking about.
Would you say it happens more frequently, and this is why I was so excited to have you here, would you say it happens more frequently in commercial than residential?
I think between certain price points.
What does that mean?
Well, if you've got a $3 million piece of property and you are selling it, you're probably selling it because you're done and you have something else to do with $3 million. You're probably not a single person owning it. You're a corporation.
Okay. You got partners?
And you've got partners, and you're not going to look at one little individual and be like, oh yeah, we trust you. Here, go ahead, take care of our property, and trust them not to burn it to the ground, do something heinous, or otherwise ruin your investment. Mm-hmm. And so these are generally deals that happen between two individuals. There is a real desire and need for the individual who is the seller to get financing that is flexible, that does not have all of the other rules that you need in order to have a loan that can be resold to Fannie, Ginnie, any of those folks. And so if you look at the big span of properties, first you got to get the ones that work for this, then they have to be owned by probably an individual, and it has to be debt-free or nearly debt-free. It's a very small percentage.
Okay, so let's go mechanics with actual numbers.
Yeah.
And I'll do an example of one that I did. And I'll do price points. This is open. We're going to be an open book here for the sake of passing knowledge on. Folks were asking about this. You don't think we should be an open book?
I was teasing.
Okay. So this one right here, one that I did was $400K purchase. It's $400,000. It was owned by a husband and wife. The husband and wife were in their late 60s. I could tell through the grapevine and then talking to them in person, similar to what you said, they were tired of managing this property. They were looking to retire. They were looking to travel, and they wanted guaranteed money.
Yeah.
So I said to them, the assessment is this. I will offer you assessment. I will give you the $400K. I'll give you $40,000 down. It was not the first one I did, so I was able to accrue a little bit of money. The first one I did was a much smaller down payment because, frankly, I didn't have the money. Okay, so I did $40K down. That then took it to $360K owed to them. We came with the term. They wanted a term of 3 years. I was like, nah, dog. Let's extend this term out. 3 years terrifies me. And then we agreed to a term for this particular one of 10 years.
Oh, wow.
Term means all the money is due, the balance owed within that 10-year period. The next thing we had to agree was with an interest rate. Of course, they wanted an interest rate that was sky high. I wanted the interest rate as low as possible. Please negotiate the interest rate.
Yep.
We agreed to a rate that was a point above market. And this particular deal, we negotiated that rate fixed throughout the 10-year term. That's very rare in commercial. So it's $360 the balance owed. I made them, we agreed to a term that I think was 4.5%, 5% at the time. It's changed, it's gone lower now. I think what market interest is 3?
Let's say 3.
About 3. So I'm probably paying a 0.5 point to 3/4 point above market, but I'm fine with that. And I make them a monthly payment every month in this particular deal for 10 years. Now, I amortize this. This is something really important. I learned this the hard way. The first seller finance deal, then I'm going to throw it to you. Then you give me an example.
Yeah.
The first seller finance deal I did a 7-year term, but I negotiated an amortization schedule of 20 years to make my monthly payment lower. The tough part about doing that is you're paying on a 20-year schedule, all that money comes due in 7. Yeah. So you better catch up really quickly or find a refinancing option.
It's just like paying off your car early.
Right, just like paying off, thanks.
It's just like paying off your car early.
Very good example.
You know, if I decide to pay off my car at year 3, which I never own a car that long, so I don't know what that's like. Yeah. But if I did, a lot of my payments have gone towards interest. So it's the exact same thing.
Right.
So you can pick the term to amortize by, and then you just put a line through, this is where the balloon payment goes, and you'll be able to see what that total payoff is.
Good description. Thank you very much. So with this particular deal, it was 10 years, and I'm going to pass it to you in 10 seconds here. 10 years, we did an amortization schedule of 10 years, because I didn't want to have figuring out the math. Yeah. I just wanted to pay it off in 10 years. And then what I'm doing here, I inherited the leases. The leases were way under market. Once those leases were done, I had a very frank conversation. This is now market rent.
Yeah.
It's not what you were paying. When the new leases came in and got to market rent, it created a lot of cash flow. I used that additional cash flow not to put in my pocket. I have an amazing wife. Yes, you have champagne taste, honey, but you know the value of $1. I love you so much, baby. I see you watching. So we took that additional rent and we just started throwing it against the debt service.
That's awesome.
So that 10-year term, we're still going to hit it in 10. We're probably going to hit it way faster than 10 because we're throwing in the additional money against it. So that's one of the deals we did. How about you on some of yours?
Yes, I'll give you my very first one. It was a condo here in Charlottesville. It was listed for $102,500. It was a 1-bedroom, 1-bath condo. Needed a little work. I planned to either Airbnb it or do a long-term rental. And it was $102,500. We put down $20,000 down, so just under 20%. And we did interest-only payments. So we had, I think it was 5% with my very first deal. So that was like $340 a month I had to pay. The term was 3 years, so I had to, in 3 years, figure it out. Either I was going to pay it off, refinance, or sell it. And I knew why I wanted interest only, because the plan was to sell it. The plan was always at some point to just get rid of it, fix it up, make it very pretty, because it's an easy fix, all cosmetic, use it while I needed it, and then sell it. And that's what I did. I wound up selling it, and that's what helped me finance my next property, which was through a traditional lender. Wasn't seller financing. But yeah, that was it. And I wanted to go back to something Jerry said earlier. Jerry mentioned, like, you have to pay for closing costs and attorneys. And I will say the simplest, cheapest closings I've had have been with my seller financing.
Same.
Because we didn't have to get appraisals. We didn't have to have the bank comb through everything. The seller was kind of like, will you do this thing?
You don't have origination costs. There's
I
there's
think
a
my
lot of
closing
money
cost
that
was
you
like-
can keep in the deal.
Yes.
Although there's still a lot of reasons to have mortgages for other things, for the kinds of stuff we're talking about. It keeps the money in the deal, and that really serves everyone.
It was huge. I bought a condo for $102,500. I bought a 10-unit for $160,000. The condo I paid maybe $1,500 in closing, like maybe. And with the apartment building, like easily $4,000. And so there's a difference. I can put that money in the person's pocket instead of putting it into institutional pockets who, in my opinion, I just don't want to.
Right, neither do I. And frankly, they don't care about you.
That's right.
Right? I mean, let's cut to the chase.
Just want to keep it in the community. And then, and we may or may not talk about flipping and all those other pieces, but when I do that and I crowdfund money from other investors, again, when I do my flips, instead of paying hard money costs to big institutions, I just pay that interest I would have paid to them back to the people, because I like to keep the money in the people's hands instead of putting it in institutional pockets.
Okay, so this one's coming in here. How do you guys find seller financing deals?
Yes.
I get that question all the time. Now, I'm going to get out of your way. My response to that is, it comes down to human connection. And it comes down to talking to people and just asking questions. And eventually, over time, you become a guy that is known in the community, that likes seller fi deals, that has an affinity for risk, and is not opposed to doing deal structure like that. Not everyone is in favor or wants a seller fi deal.
Yeah.
A lot of folks
Or is
just wanna-
capable.
Yeah, go ahead, jump in.
Or is capable. It all does boil down to relationships and people that are embedded in the community, people that know what's going on. And sometimes it involves just sitting down and picking up the phone. So, we've talked about the types of properties where this is a potential, so you can narrow that down a bit.
Yeah.
There's ways to sort of narrow that down with somebody. Then you can start rolling through who they are, how does the property look, who owns it, and have a conversation about that.
Yeah. So how about this one here that's coming in? When you do a deal, are you doing the deals to flip or to hold? For me personally, in a market like Charlottesville, I'm in the hold game. I'm doing all these deals. I'm gonna cut to the chase. I'm doing all these deals not to make short-term or front-end money. And the reason I'm able to do that is because I have 2 other businesses that are paying for my mortgage at my house, keeping my wife and my child fed, and they're doing well. My game plan with the portfolio of real estate that I own is to pass it to my son. So that's the long game that I'm playing here. I'm not saying that's the right game. I'm not saying that's the wrong game. That's just my game. So I'm curious of your take on seller fi deals. If you're doing this to flip, to make front end, to make back end, to hold, your mindset on each deal you do.
So all of them. I want all the money all the time. I want it in the front. I want it while I'm holding it. And I'll go back to the condo, right? I bought the condo and I was making long-term rents, I'm just making up numbers right now. I was maybe able to get $1,000 for it long-term rental, but as an Airbnb, I was able to make like $2,500 to $3,000, especially with UVA doing well and people coming to see games and seeing their babies. So I got it in the short end as I was renting it every month, and then when I sold it, I think we sold it for like $30,000 more than we bought it for, and that was in a span of 6 or 7 months. So that whole time I was making money, and then made money at the end, and made a relationship which doesn't have its own, I guess, financial immediately, but is worth something. So I like money all the time. But I think what it really comes down to is not the market as much as what your game plan is. My game plan was to sell it so I could buy something bigger. I knew that from the beginning. So I went into it saying, I'm going to flip. This most recent seller finance I just did is a long-term buy and hold. It's a 12-unit building, and I don't plan to sell it anytime soon. And that's why, even though the term is super short, I'm either going to pay it off in cash, which I'm sure I can get in the next 3 years, or go back, like I said, and say, hey, we've had a good relationship these last 3 years. Will you extend this and now let me pay off some of the principal? Because right now all I'm doing is paying interest.
And I think like all real estate deals, it's a very personal thing.
Yeah.
You made a point of saying that's my game.
Right.
Well, it's all based on what you're looking for and what your goals are. One of my favorite things to remind people of is that I've been with Deandra longer than her husband.
That's funny.
All right, dude, I want to get in that sphere of network. I want in that network.
And your first plan is not your last plan.
Yeah.
Right.
And so the
Well
game
said.
plan changed as life changed.
Yes.
And so I think every time is different and unique. And one of the important things is to know where you're headed. Not just dive into this because she looks pretty and she seems like she's having a good time. Maybe I'll do that. Have a plan, know what our goal is, because that really helps negotiate for the right things and put down the right numbers to get where you want to go. The other thing that you said that I want to sort of tease apart, you have a video on TikTok that talks about don't need the money.
Yes.
So when you're sitting here saying, I want the money in the front, I want the money when I own it, I want it on the back end, that's not all greed. We all want to get paid for the work we do. Let's be clear about that. So
There's nothing wrong with that.
we're all going to accept that and set it aside. Money's important. We all want to pay our bills and put food on the table and that sort of stuff. But I think one of the things that you have done really, really well that I always want people to look towards is part of being a good landlord is keeping up your end of the deal. Frequently, when you're turning over buildings and you're walking back through them, much like putting a car up for sale, we all take it and we have it detailed and we might have some paint fix and, well, the tires are kind of old. So now she's stepping into this property not needing the money for her personal stuff because she's handled that. So now she can take care of the property, take care of the clients and the people that live there. That gives her an opportunity with the open spaces to rent it for more rent. That money then sets aside and you're able to keep all of that going. Does she make money every month and through the... Yes. But I think there's a point to not needing the money.
Yeah,
How do we design that? You didn't just quit your job after you did your first building.
I know. I wish.
And so it's, these aren't things that you step into and suddenly your life is different, but they are things that you work at over the course of years where it will feel like your life changed overnight.
I want to throw to you, in a matter of moments, throw this first, Deandra, when you quit the job to do this.
Yeah.
Because not everyone is as, and unfortunate is not the right word because you freaking have earned this. Not everyone has gone down the road of quitting the 9 to 5.
Yeah.
Okay, this is oftentimes a side hustle for someone until they get these tipping points and the debt is cleared, the mortgages are paid, and then they consider quitting their job. So I want to go down that road with you in a matter of moments. I want to throw this to you here. Having the option to refi with the bank when you do a seller-fi deal, if the you-know-what hits the fan and you cannot pay all the money that's owed to the seller before the term is up. The options are make sure the rent rolls look good, and you're going to have to prove the rent rolls over an extended period of time, probably 3 years with the bank, right? The other option is that upfront payment. The more you make in there, the more equity you have in the property, so the more likely you will find a refinancing option from a banker.
Yes, and most commercial loans are about the month-to-month. They're about the P&L, not the balance sheet.
Yeah.
So I think, as we talked about, have a plan. It starts with my plan. Now, as I find a property that might work, what's the plan for this property, and how do those two go together?
Yeah.
You always want to have a plan for your property just in case something else happens, so that it can move smoothly, and you want to live in a position where if somebody's selling a property for a reason, don't adopt their reason and just end up a seller with the same desire to get rid of it. Have a new plan, be clear on that, move forward in a way so that you have more options should the proverbial feces hit the oscillatory device. Yeah.
And I want to piggyback off what Quinton said. That flexibility is so important, and I think a lot of us saw it during COVID, right? When things were starting to shut down and certain businesses couldn't pivot because there was no other option, they closed. Is what happened if there wasn't enough money in the bank. But if we can do short-term rentals, long-term rentals, commercial space, or if we just didn't need the money for a few months, we were able to hold on to our businesses and do something else, even if it wasn't in the original plan. But that's because we bought properties that were flexible. Instead of saying, I'm buying this one thing that can only do this one thing, and it only profits if everything is peachy. If the skies are clear and there's no issues, that's when I make money. We want to be able to make money even when things are bad or not needed.
Well said. Well said. The Airbnb piece has intrigued me so much. I have not, worked that model into the portfolio. Talk to me about that. The resistance you may have gotten from the municipality about Airbnb, if any.
Yeah.
Whether there was resistance with any kind of association or neighborhood group with the Airbnb model? Did anything like that come up?
Oh yeah, I mean, Airbnb was very different 5 years ago.
It was the Wild West.
Yes, it was, and for a while it was like everything can be an Airbnb. Anything you want, nobody's checking anything. Go about your business, and we have left most of that business at this point because it just is not legal anymore, we are able to slip through some loopholes just because of like what my husband does and what I do and how we're able to do our residences. And I wouldn't recommend it to most people.
So you're doing the 180 days a year in some of these?
And that's because my husband goes to school here, and so we have property here so he can crash so that he's not making that drive back and forth.
Brilliant.
And so when he's not crashing, then we can. But that only happened because he goes to school here, and we can have an actual reason, but we still have to have a business.
That's
for it.
completely
we still have to
legit.
submit our taxes. Yeah.
We should tell them the 180-day metric when it comes to Airbnbs.
Yeah, so you can't rent out your place for more than 180 days. You have to be able to still be in the space. So it's also, we're not renting the entire space. It's like renting a bedroom. He's just not there. But you can't just because it makes sense, right? Because they don't want investors taking over cheap
hotels.
Yeah.
And
cheap,
taking
taking over
taxes.
And I guess it's about the taxes, but I guess I'm thinking about the people, is that they don't want us gobbling up all the affordable housing to do whatever we want with it.
That's true.
Look
That
at
could
Jerry.
be
Jerry's
probably
like,
what it is.
all right.
I think you're probably right there. It's that. That's what it is.
We don't want to take that from the people because that's where you would go. You would go to the $600, $700, $800 properties, rent them out for $3,000 or $4,000 a month.
Totally what it is.
So we're trying to protect those people. So we get it, but that's why I don't do it anymore. I understood why the rules were put in place, and I'm a rule follower for the most part, and we got out of it. But that was an option. That was something that if worse comes to worse, we can do that if we have a 3-month break between tenants and we have all this extra furniture, because we also use that furniture to stage properties we're selling or whatever. So yeah.
That's great. So you're a super connected guy. Are your clients currently still looking for Airbnb options, or has that ship sailed?
We haven't seen a lot of Airbnb options. I think a lot of that,
tied to
it
the
had
rules,
its
right?
day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It had its day, and it was sort of this selling ice cream out of the back of my car without any music
Right.
kind of moment, and that's over.
Yeah.
Because it turned into some bad things. It also evaded some good things. And it doesn't mean anybody that did it was bad. It was an opportunity at the moment. But it's not quite the same setup. What you are seeing nowadays, particularly with the housing market being how it is, are 30 to 90-day stays.
Yes.
So I need to buy a new house in town because the house I'm in is too small, and I've just had my 8th child, and I keep dreaming of holding them under the bathwater, and that's got to stop because I can't make money in prison.
Quinton Beckham.
And so, but it's really hard to
I didn't know
move.
about this model.
It's really hard to move directly from house A to house B, because if you've got a contingency on your offer, you're not as good as the next buyer.
And a hotel's too expensive for
And a
30,
hotel's
90
too
days.
expensive. Well, and I've got 8 kids,
And
remember?
not
Yeah,
big
right.
enough, yeah.
I've got 8 kids. No hotel will let me in with 8 kids. They'll call the police.
There's
So
a 60 to 90 day model that's emerging.
Lindsay Milby has one. They're already there.
Yeah.
Where now these become the transition homes. So you can sell your house, you rent 30 to 90 days with some options to extend. During that period, you offer on the new house, and now you no longer have a
Dude,
contingency.
I just learned something.
And I'll say I do it with a different market. I do it with nurses, especially in the COVID
Travel
space.
nurses?
The travel nurses who get recruited. They come
Absolutely.
here for 2 months and they need somewhere to crash and
And
don't
they
want to
make
stay.
bank.
And they're willing to pay. And sometimes it's the company that pays. So the nurse doesn't care. The nurse doesn't care what the rent is. She just needs to find a place. He or she needs to find a place and be there. The company will play the whole 3 or 4 month lease up front. And they just rock out. And so, again, back to that 30 to 120 days. It's not a 2-year thing. It's not a 1-year thing. But it's
I
a
just
need.
learned a second thing. Where do you make the connections with the nurses and getting the nurses to get into your places?
So there's sites that are escaping my mind right now, but a lot of my people at this point are repeats. So they get bounced from here to Richmond to Lynchburg to Roanoke. But when they come back to Charlottesville, I always give it a little extra discount. Like, you've been here before, you know the ropes, do what you're supposed to do. But that was a great place someone needs to be here for 60 days, doesn't want furniture, doesn't want deposits for internet or utilities. And I, again, have furniture left over from staging, and I have a small space I can give you.
I love it. I absolutely love it.
It's an awesome idea.
This question that I want to throw to you is, and this came up on Real Talk, the condo investment versus the single family detached. One of the things that resonated with me from the last time you were here was you love condoed properties.
Love them.
Talk to us.
I love HOAs if I don't have to live in them. So I love them for my investment properties because I'm not there. I don't care what color we're painting things. I don't care what mulch we're choosing. They save the money for the roof. They maintain the power washing for outside. So it takes especially as someone who manages their own properties, who is doing all the work herself, it takes all that pressure off of me of having to own these tools and know how to use them because I've hurt myself more than I care to admit trying to work power tools from YouTube. And so I loved it. I loved that there were quiet hours. I loved even that there were no dogs allowed. There were no pets. So I was like, I wish I could. I wish I could give you the pets. But I can't because the HOA said
out of my
no.
control.
I wish I could, but the HOA said I can't do it. And that's why I really love them. They keep the value of the property. Now, I know as a homeowner, it can be really frustrating because if you want to expand, if you want to do something different, if you want to have people over, then it feels frustrating to say, I paid all this money, I continue to pay all this money, and I still can't do what I want. But as an investor, I think it's really nice.
Katie Pearl, your colleague, says, how much extra do you charge for short-term rentals versus market rent? It's a good question.
So I tell my people, when I know I'm going to have vacancy, if somebody's leaving, I start leasing maybe 3 months out or like promoting, and I always like to push it in that first month and just see if I get any
aggressive.
bites. Yeah, you're just like, I have time, because I know what the market is, right? You know what the market rent is, and you know you can get that. So maybe let's push it up $300 or $400 and see what happens. Especially because I know, because I don't care about industry. So if the industrial nursing complex is paying for this, I'll make the extra $300 or $400. But if I don't get that higher one, then I will slowly, as we get closer and closer to when that vacancy is going to happen, then I'll start to lower the price until I hit market.
So you're talking 10-15% increase?
Oh, yeah, minimum.
Minimum?
Yeah,
Very
sure.
nice. Yeah. I love this. This question's coming in. How much do rents increase year over year? How about that for you, QB, and then you, Deandra?
I mean, I think you should expect a 1.5% increase, but I also think particularly, I'm giving a floor limit. I'm giving a floor limit. You should expect 1.5% increase, but I think it also depends on the individual owner's desires. Remember, we talked about having a plan. If I have a 10-year tenant that is super low maintenance, that never irritates the other side of the duplex, I might not raise his rent. He's always on time, he's quiet, he does his work, he helps keep the other tenants happy because he never complains and he never causes them distress. That might be worth giving up that 1%. And then I can do whatever I need to do with the other property.
Okay, mine, I'll throw it to you. Mine uptick between 4 and 5% across the 24 tenant portfolio.
Yeah, so I would say I'm probably on the low end, from mostly 0% up to maybe 3 or 4%. I know, like in one of the counties I own, they only do tax assessments every 5 years. So my bill is not increasing. There's nothing
What county is that?
In Pittsylvania County.
Is that in Virginia?
Yep.
Really?
Right under Lynchburg.
Okay.
Right above Danville. It's a huge like swath.
That's
of-
amazing.
But yeah, so this is our reassessment year, but we haven't had a reassessment since 2017, which means that my taxes have not gone up, and they're low. Like I pay, that property I just told you, the taxes are $1,000 a year for a 12-unit building. The taxes in my personal home are $1,900 every 6 months. So that's the difference between like Albemarle County and Pittsylvania County, where I own. But just like Quinton said, they don't bother me. I like brick squares. If you can give me a one-level brick square that is, I don't have termites, it's cinder block, I don't have moisture, we fixed the roof, I don't have gas, so we're not worried about, like there's nothing to break. Even if we had a tenant who had a really bad roach infestation, an older lady who kind of disappeared for a few weeks, by the time we got there, it was bad. But because of the cinder blocks, because there's like 2 outlets on the walls connecting units, it didn't travel. And those things make it easy for me to keep the rents low, especially when I know people on fixed income. And I will say in Charlottesville, one of the reasons I don't raise this very often is because turnover costs money. And it's cheaper sometimes just to keep them. Like if I'm gonna pay $2,000 to have a property turned over, to get an extra $50 a month, it just doesn't make sense.
I learned that the hard way, and so my mentor, his name is Bill Nitchman. Bill Nitchman, I would say, not to embarrass him here, probably owns, I don't know, 100 million plus of real estate in Charlottesville and Albemarle County. And for 18 months, we shared a wall together in a building on the downtown mall, and I was a pest to this man, literally going into his office every single freaking day for 18 months.
Was there no cinder block, and that's how you
No,
got
it was
through?
drywall. It was drywall. And you'll appreciate this. It was drywall, so whenever he closed the door, I heard it. Or opened the door, and I'm like, Bill's there. And then next thing I know, I'm knocking on his door, and I'm like literally pestering about every single question humanly possible about this. And Bill said to me, and this is something that's really resonated, and Wanda, we'll get to your comments here, and we'll get to the other questions that are coming in. Bill said to me, if you have a vacancy for 1 month, even if you raise your rents 5 or 7%, that 1 month vacancy will always supersede a 4 or 5% increase, or usually will supersede the 4 or 5% increase. So you want to maintain the occupancy even if you don't have to raise the rents. That's an important point right there.
And it's not just the vacancy, because it's the turnover.
The turnover, yeah.
There's
I would love
costs
to
for
have an
turnover.
empty unit. If I could have an empty, clean unit, sure. We can set
It
a
never
month and
happens
raise
that
the
way.
Correct. Like I have to and some
that's
people,
life.
Yeah,
That's life.
and some people think
People
the security
live.
deposit is enough, and sometimes it is. Sometimes it is just I just need to hire a cleaning service to come clean it. But sometimes the floor is torn up, and
Paint.
The paint. I had smokers. And as much as you think one coat of, it's not. It's scrubbing walls, power washing walls. It's multiple coats of kills, and that costs money. So it's cheaper to keep them sometimes, and it makes them happier. So I'm all for it. Not raising the rent.
I'm so into this because I think there's so many opportunities for people that didn't believe they had them, if they are motivated, if they're willing to work hard, and I want them to embrace that. We also we're constantly talking about housing affordability and affordable housing, and solid rentals that are affordable are an important piece of that puzzle. You can look at a land use map all you want, and there's lots going on right now around Charlottesville with that.
Yes.
You can look at it all you want, but if you have a nice local owner who actually has met their tenant, who has a good plan, and as you heard her say before, I want to keep the money in the community, what more could you ask for? And so I think as we're going through this period where so many rental owners, and we're usually talking about large corporations, are being thrown under the bus in many ways, there's a great opportunity for us to have nice, well thought out local owners who are maintaining good rentals that are doing a good job and keeping that money in the community.
It's the
I
round
thought
of
that's what
applause.
that was.
It's the round of applause. So this is a question that's literally up your alley from Twitter, from Grayson. Should I pull, he says, I have a lot of equity in my home right now. Would you advise pulling any of the money out of my house to go the seller financing route? It depends on your affinity for risk. I do not suggest you do that.
I also have two answers.
Super freaking risky to do that. What I've tried to do with every single property that I purchase is I create an LLC for every property I purchase, a single member S Corp LLC to compartmentalize risk. I then have a holding company that also offers more corporate protection. So I technically
But you're not talking about your own home.
Well, I guess what I'm saying with this is, I was going to go back to that. So if I buy a property, it's say Jerry Miller Real Estate 6, Jerry Miller Real Estate 7 LLC. And then the Miller organization owns that LLC, and I own the Miller organization. I've compartmentalized or siloed my home from this. So if the feces hits the oscillating infrastructure on the ceiling, or whatever the hell you called it right there, the home where my son and wife live is not risked.
Please
Grayson,
jump in.
Yeah.
There are ways to access equity without pulling out money as well. You're in this great spot that you live in the home you're talking about. This would be different if there was an investment property or like your parents' property. But since you own the home, you could get a home equity line of credit where you can have access to that $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 and only use it if you find a deal. And then set up, like Jerry said, set up all those legal protections to keep it away from your home, but you don't have to pull out the money. The interest rates now are amazing, just like the gentleman said earlier. You often, for HELOCs, only have to pay like interest only for the first 15 years and then note comes due, but you don't have to pull it out, because I tell my people, I don't like you sitting on money for no reason.
Yeah,
This feels
you're
silly.
losing money.
Yes, and a lot of people do HELOCs for free. Like a lot of credit unions will, or very, very low closing costs, because the home has been appraised, they have all these other pieces, they know there's equity there. Sometimes they even do like the little desk appraisal. They don't even send somebody out, they just like look at the assessments or whatnot. But there's ways to access that money without pulling it out and sitting on it, especially if you can't find something. And I think that might be a better way to go, other than leveraging your house with nothing in mind.
And for the vast majority of people, please don't treat your own personal home like a commodity.
That's why I threw this here.
Stop doing that. You're not going to suddenly make so much money off of the house you own for 1 year that you're going to be able to retire and go to the Bahamas.
Yeah.
It's not the way it works. Do you generate wealth by being a homeowner versus a renter? Yes, over the long haul, and most of it's about fixing your housing costs at a certain point in time. So I'm always opposed to people treating their home as a commodity, and to be a little more fine-tuned with that. If you own an $800,000 house that's free and clear and you're pulling out $50,000 to make something else like this happen, that's one thing. If you own a $400,000 house where you've got $80,000 in equity and you're going to pull out 60 of that, that's a bad idea. You know, I'm
a little different than you on this one, and you know I'm a little different here. But I'll play the devil's advocate with you.
I think most people would agree that we're not the
We're
same.
different. Is it Barbara Bosick of Remax? Barbara Bosick. She says, "Amen, Quinton. Your home is not a commodity." From Remax, Barbara Bosick.
Yep.
So this is not for everybody. This is not for everybody. I've used my homes as commodities. The previous home that I had in Redfields before. Okay.
But
go ahead.
yes, but before you go down this line
Yeah.
and sound very convincing in that way that you tend to do,
right.
even when you're not really sure.
Okay.
You said homes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Plural.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Get to homes before we start
Ooh,
talking about
speak
using
quick.
a home as a
Okay.
commodity.
Okay, go down that road.
Okay.
Go down that road.
Get to the plural
That's
Yeah.
right.
before you start using them as a commodity.
Yeah.
So we were talking earlier about, she needs to know the seller. She wants to make sure that she owns the home so that she's not suddenly, they didn't pay taxes. If you go back to the market crash, a lot of the homelessness that happened from the market crash was people paying rent to folks that were leveraged 6 homes deep.
Right. Right.
And the minute the first home crashed, the entire set of dominoes came tumbling down.
Yep.
So I think as not just a general rule, but a 95% rule, most of you out there watching this are not in a position to use your personal home as a commodity.
Yeah, okay.
Because the first thing that goes wrong in your life has a lot bigger ramification than just that thing.
And that's well said. So I'm gonna respond to that. So, and by using it as a commodity, I don't necessarily mean HELOC. I mean knowing the market extremely well and knowing the right time to sell and buy. The Redfields home I did, and I'll just cut to the point with numbers because numbers help. Was a 368 purchase. Lived there for a little while. Ended up being a 480 sell. Then took that and bought
I see.
a 7 in Glenmore. And now, because that was done right before COVID, have a lot of equity there and am now persuading the better half to try to level up, but it's not utilizing HELOC in that scenario. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying.
I also want to add, this goes back to the flexibility piece. People come to me a lot and say they have a home and they want to rent it. They have a rental. And I'm like, what kind of rental do you have? And they said, my home. I was like, no, you have a home. You don't have a rental. Those are two different things. And I think that's really important for some people to know, is that the 4-bedroom, 4-bath house you bought for your family does not necessarily make a good rental. So if you max out with your equity, there is no wiggle room. The only thing we can maybe do is sell, and we're hoping that we're high enough to also, because you didn't cover realtor costs the first time. Right? You didn't cover all the sellers, the 3% concession you got. All that's on your table now, on your plate that you have to give, and which is why I think Quinton's saying, like, it's not a commodity. So a sale is different from you trying to leverage some of that equity.
Yeah. That's how I use it. Yeah.
When I was purchasing, the homes I lived in when I was like house hacking were going to be rentals. I knew from, other than maybe the very first property, just because that was the most I could afford, after that, it was always like, this is going to be a rental. I'm living here currently, but it's a square box with brick on the side. It is going to be my rental property. My husband and I live in a house now that is not a rental, and we're thinking about moving. And he said to me, well, we'll just rent this. And I was like, I'm sorry. This is in the middle of the woods with a well and 2 acres of land.
And it's not cinder blocks.
That's not what you rent.
This is not a good rental. I have no flexibility here, which is why I cannot keep this as a part of my portfolio, because I'm stuck. And max, I'll get like, I appreciate that. And max, I'll get like $100 for a rental. But that's why I wouldn't leverage it. I would do what Jerry said. I would say, let's time this to sell at the right time. Get out, use that money for something else. But when you don't have that flexibility, you're really maxing out on something you just can't afford to, and that's so bad.
I totally agree. And you're not adding value to the property that you're leveraging. So if you're pulling out money to put on solar, and basically your payment's going to replace your electric bill, and then later on you have a value when you sell the property, that's a different story.
Yeah.
You're adding value to the property itself. You're doing a trade. But when you're pulling it out and you're setting it somewhere else, I don't know. I just don't go for that. I'd like to point out, too, like we talk a lot about traditional financing, and a lot of what we're talking about with leverage as opposed to seller financing, we were referring to as traditional. This has really not even been around 100 years yet. So most of how we're talking about seller financing is how we did it for a lot longer than what we're doing now.
With banks.
Yeah.
Yes.
And you're basically
with banks,
meaning
and
people would go-
and guaranteed mortgages,
Okay.
and all of that was a product of the New Deal that has carried forward, morphed a little bit, but
Giving
not
you
by a
props
lot.
Again.
But not by a lot. So what we're in now has a lot of great features to it, but let's understand, in the history of how we've owned land in this property, it is not traditional.
This question for both you guys from Steven on Twitter. Would you consider selling your home now because you guys are on a lot of equity and then renting something and then utilizing the money you make to grow the portfolio?
So I called my realtor last April. I called Jeff and was like, so tell me how much my property. So, Stephen, I think, yes, I have absolutely considered it.
You've considered going to renting for the personal residence?
No, I've considered selling. So I was going to follow up with, I also own a lot of rentals where I currently live. So I would not have then rented from someone else. I would have just transferred over to one of my cheaper properties in the meantime.
And live there?
Yeah, I just would have lived in one of my
you really
rentals.
would have leveled up with that?
Yes. So, I mean, and that's still on the table if I can convince
Are you going to persuade the man to do that? Is he not down with
just
that?
Like you
I don't
said,
think
like
my wife
your
would be down.
lady, my tastes have grown, and I tried really hard for them not to.
Right.
My tastes have gotten
That's
a
one
little
of our
true.
downfalls. Don't you not think?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that I own in lots of states, but I also own like where my family lives. That's why I bought in those states. So if I wanted to move somewhere else, I would just go to the properties I own and live there. Now it would be smaller, but I don't think I would rent, at least right now. I don't think I'm at that point.
And I think the downside of that is, we're talking about selling and buying in the same area. And so everything that works in your favor when you're selling your house then turns around to work against you when you're purchasing.
It's expensive.
You're just trading places with the
Unless
person you
rent
just
in a
made money
property
off
you
of.
already own.
That's a different
That is legit.
Different
You
scenario.
really could level up with that.
different scenario. And we're still talking about using our personal home as a commodity. And I always think that with the rare exception of 1 or 2 times out of 1,000, it's a bad idea.
How many?
It's a lottery ticket kind of odds versus looking at a property that's separate from your personal needs with a plan for how I'm going to acquire this property, how I'm going to make it profitable, and how I'm going to keep it up my end of the deal of a landlord. It's very, very different.
And going back, Stephen, also like the numbers lead, right? Because I think we think $50,000, $60,000, $75,000 in equity is a lot of money. But if the rent is $1,500, if the rent is $2,000, and you made $50,000, that $50,000 sounds really big, but within 3 years, you're out, you're done. And that's if you didn't have to pay capital gains tax on that money. Like hopefully you've lived there for the last 5 years, or two out of the last 5.
Yeah.
Hopefully you have lived there 2 out of the last 5 and you don't have to pay it, and or the equity is not above your like threshold between your household. But once you get the money, you got to look at the rent and say like, well, how long is this going to sustain me in this area? And if it's not very long, then it's not worth it.
Heather on LinkedIn, for Quinton, Heather says, how many seller finance deals happen in comparison to traditional financing, Quinton?
It's hard to know that as like a real answer. I can tell you it's probably less than 1%.
Yeah.
Certainly in our area. There's some commercial deals that we would call seller financing, but the numbers are so huge, you might as well call them something else. But seller financing, like we're talking about, very, very rare.
Don't you think and I'm asking you, I'm learning from you here, the seller fi model happens way more commercial than residential?
Much more frequently,
because the price points are so high.
Because people that own the commercial things are not treating their own house like a commodity.
Yeah, there you go.
They're treating an investment like
That's
a commodity.
right. Yeah.
And so there is the flexibility to do that in the commercial market in many more circumstances than there is in the private market.
Well said. How about renters conveying, and how you can improve rent rolls when you inherit renters? That's a tricky one.
So again, I think Quinton said it best earlier, where this is a long-term game. I think people get real hype about saying, I want to invest, I want to get an extra $25. And it's like, but that's going to cost you $2,000 in reno. So why? Why do you want this extra $25 for it to cost you $2,000 to fix it? And if that tenant leaves in a year, you have to do turnover, we're back in the same spot. So don't get too caught up by the sexiness of increasing your rent roll by $100, $200 a month if it's going to cost you a lot. I put in a dishwasher in one of my units, and it upped the rent $100. Very excited. The tenant next door has broken her garbage disposal, and you're just like, I would have taken not the $100. Like, if you could just wash your own dishes, and I wasn't in a phone call about the garbage disposal or the dishwasher or the pressure. It's not always worth it.
Well, that's why I mentioned, we talked about off air, of the 24, 23 are commercial. The one residential causes more
a lot
headaches
of
than
issues.
all 23 combined.
Absolutely.
All of them combined.
But this is why, again, I said before, I like bricks. I like brick squares that don't have a lot to them. Like there's a fridge, there is a stove, maybe wash and dryer. There's not a lot to break. There's not a lot of issues. But yes, there are ways to increase rent rolls, and sometimes the change is drastic. I'm not talking about somebody who's renting for $700 and it's really a $1,500 deal. It's like, yes, at that point you should do what is necessary. But if you're going up less than $100 per door, I'm not saying it's not. I'm just saying, like, let's look at what it actually costs to get there, especially with the tenant still in it, right? Can you work around the tenant? Are you moving this person? Are they leaving? Before we get too crazy about just upping rent rolls.
Paul McCarter.
Hey, Paul.
Is that Avenue?
I think so, yeah.
Paul's watching. The rental market in Charlottesville is almost as hard on tenants as the purchase market is on buyers.
Amen.
You want to go down that road?
I don't know how much more there is to that road. Feels like a cul-de-sac.
Yeah.
But
It's basically saying because there's so little inventory, and as
remember that housing affordability is all forms of housing.
That's right.
Yeah.
There we go.
You know,
Well said.
we talk mostly about buying and selling homes. We're talking about investment properties right now because that's what we do, and that's what people mostly tune in to hear. We need rentals as much as we need single-family homes, high-density homes, accessory dwellings. We need that full spectrum. Depending on your personal circumstances and your finances, it may be really conducive for you to rent for a year versus buy a home.
Yeah.
But where are you going to rent?
Right.
And you know, if you go down the list of rentals in Charlottesville, it's pretty sad.
Yeah.
Both just in terms of volume and sometimes what you get for the dollar because the inventory is so low.
And I can put that in perspective here. Keith Smith, partner, Yes Realty Partners, has a question for us. Keith, we'll get to your question. So the residential I have rents for $1,650 a month. $1,650 a month. I have a debt service payment left on that. That's say, I don't know, in the 20s. So I owe like 20 something on it. The mortgage on that is $1,005. The HOA is $150. So I'm cash flow positive on it. It's the lowest price point in the Kale School District. $1,650 a month. The lowest price point in the Kale School District is this condo in the Villas at Southern Ridge, which is off Old Lynchburg Road.
Yeah.
Keith Smith says this: at what point, number of units, does one need to move from owner managed to property manager properties? That's a good question.
I don't know if there's a number of units or if it's your goal, right? What's your lifestyle? It's Jerry had mentioned earlier, like, why did you leave teaching? And it was because I got to the point where I couldn't teach and manage my rental properties anymore. And Quinton hadn't opened a property management company yet. So I was stuck trying to figure this out by myself. It was terrible. And I couldn't answer the phone. Like, I'm teaching. If there's an emergency, like, I couldn't stop what I was doing to pick up the phone any longer. As much as I wanted to contain it, it wasn't at that place yet. So I left, but I'm at the point now where I could go back if I wanted to. And I've opened up that conversation with my husband because we've gotten, everything's under control now. We have set the cultures, we have fixed the units we're gonna fix, we have put the money aside we need to put aside. So I could go back to teaching with more units than I had when I left because I have set up a system to deal with it.
Nice.
But that's not everyone's goals.
Sure.
Like, I wanted the flexibility to work by myself. I wanted the flexibility to leave an unhealthy environment if I was ever put in one. And not everyone is reaching for that necessarily. So I was willing to live small to do that. And some people will say, no, I'll keep my job. I'll just farm it out to a property manager so I don't have to deal with it, so I can keep and level up in different ways. But I don't think it's a number of units. I think it's really, what do you want? Because you might feel tired after 3. You might be like, 3 people is too many people.
And there are times you feel that way.
And you might not feel that if you have 50, especially if it's all in one building. You might not feel that same stress.
And we're back to that commitment. There's a commitment.
Yes.
There's things the tenant owes you as the landlord, and there's things you owe the tenant back.
Mm-hmm.
And so when can you make that work? What does that take? Can you do it on your own? Do you need to quit your teaching job, or do you need to hire a company? I think it's all about that commitment.
And Barbara Bozick and Paul, you're right. Mountain View Elementary,
Yes.
not Kale. Mountain View. Thank you for holding me accountable there. I'll throw this to you because this man's this is a humble dude here, but he's got a lot of irons in the fire. You got a lot of businesses that you're managing here. The property management business, the nitty-gritty of being a good property management company is?
It's all about that interaction, and I think a lot of it, she talks about culture. So there's not just the written expectations between her and her tenants. There's the unwritten expectations.
Yeah.
And the visits and the being able to actually know who you're renting from and vice versa. And so I think property management in and of itself, it's a hard business. It's very work intensive. And I think sometimes we get deceived because we watch too much HGTV.
Right.
Or, you watch her videos on TikTok, but she still looks like this even when she's checking out a septic tank. And so we get deceived. And there's a ton of work in it. There's been a lot of time invested that you won't hear her talk about investigating what kind of lease should I use? What are the appropriate legal protections? How am I going to do this? How am I going to do that? And so I think for a lot of folks that are doing this as a side hustle or as part of their overall retirement investment strategy, find a property manager that does this all the time, full time for a living, because that's what she did. It's just that it was her.
So go ahead. Yeah.
Adding to that nitty gritty piece, Quinton talks about the relationship and that you have standards as a landlord. I want to say that one of the most difficult pieces I think most people find is that you have to uphold those standards even if your tenant is not. And that legally is your responsibility, but that will set you up to know what's really happening. So I have a tenant who has not paid for the last 2 months, and I still have to fix her stuff. Like, I still have to fix her stove. She called and said her stove wasn't working. I was there with the new stove because it is still my responsibility, even if she's not upholding her end. And that's really, really hard for people to sit with emotionally. My friend said, I have a lot of confidence and no pride. So I will do whatever is necessary, but I don't care. I don't care what you think.
Line.
I know people are upset that they have to give a stove, but it's like, it is what it is, right? The building as a whole profits more than it needs to. Not that it needs to, more than is necessary, I guess. But I can buy the stove, and my end of the bargain said I was going to provide you with appliances that work, unless you specifically damage them, or the only time when you don't is if I feel unsafe. If you have threatened me for some reason and I can't enter, or you have a dog here that is not tied up, if I cannot do my job because I am unsafe. But other than that, one of those pieces is that you, as a teacher, as a boss, I think in a lot of situations, you are required to hold up your end no matter what the tenant does. And if you can't sit with that, if you can't go to sleep knowing you put a fridge in a person's unit that's not paying, then you should just get someone else to do it.
So Savannah is asking on LinkedIn about partners. So I'm going to throw the partner concept to you guys. Mm-hmm. This one is coming. I want to throw this to you, though. So the leases with evictions, and no one wants to evict.
Yes.
Evicting is the worst part about doing this here, right? Okay, but this concept is coming up in commercial. My commercial lease, and I'll throw this to you too, Quinton. With my commercial lease, if I do not receive the rent by the sixth day of the month, I have a $35 per day tax.
Ooh.
And by the 15th of the month, the lease says I could go into the space, take the stuff out, and re-rent it. So by the 15th day of the month, with commercial, residential is way different.
Yes.
So by the 15th day of the month, if I have not received a rent check, I go in, if I need to, change the keys, get my movers to come in, and the stuff is taken out, and on the 16th day, I'm marketing the property. So that's just one thing that I'm doing with commercial. So partners, are you guys opposed to partners with growing a portfolio to help you guys level up faster?
I am not. I want to talk slightly about what you said with eviction, and
Okay.
I think going back to the property manager piece, so residential is a little different, and then it differs from county to county because you also have to go with your court schedules. If you can't, because we have to go through the court system, we cannot just go in and change locks. We have to get a judge to say yes. It also depends on when your county holds court. And my county holds court every 2 weeks. So it's not a simple matter, but this goes back to my pride where I have a lady who I have to go get the check from her in her hand every month. And
Why is that?
she is 85 years old.
Understood.
She doesn't trust the post office.
Okay.
And so I go and I get the check. And now, if you don't want to do that, you could get a different tenant. You could hire a property manager, or you could say, sucks to suck. You got to send it in the mail or do whatever you have to do. But this goes back to, what are you willing to do? What kind of business are you trying to set up? I'm already there, so it doesn't bother me to just, stop by and answer the door. If I wasn't, we'd have to find other things. In terms of partners, I partner pretty exclusively with my family. Because again, I want to keep the money in the people's hands and my family's hands. And I want them to level up as much as I want to level up. I will say with partners, I'm pretty easygoing, but I also need to have the last say. So if you're going to partner with me, almost all my partners are silent. I have one, my father, one active partner.
I was going to say, I've met your family. I don't believe you.
I have one active partner who likes to have a say in how things go. But almost other than that, my partners are silent. And to be honest, those are the kind of people I attract. I see what you're doing. I don't want to do that. I just want you to write me a check. And I would say that's almost like seller financers too. The owners are like, they're partners. They own part of it too because I haven't paid it off. They just want to get a check. So I like partners, but they got to be silent.
And I think the big deal is defining things up front.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of times what makes a good property manager, whether it's the owner or a company, is that everything's defined up front.
Yes.
This is why leases are so long. What makes good partners in business is having lots of things defined up front.
Yeah.
The reason marriages fail 50% of the time is because those vows are really vague. And, you know, there's just bad definition. And when you said this, I thought that, but then you said I do, and I thought that, you know. So really, the better you can define things up front, be clear about them, and walk away if you can't live with them, the more successful your partnerships will be in business and life.
Well said. We're going 80 minutes, so we'll wrap up here. Why don't we do like a final word here? And I'm going to throw this out to anyone. The seller finance approach to doing deals is something that should not be super intimidating, even though it's not the norm. It's something to consider if you want to build some wealth with real estate. Frankly, it's more approachable than you think. And the deals exist. You just have to talk to people and know some of the Quinton Beckhams of the world that no other Quinton Beckhams of the world, to put it in perspective. So consider that opportunity or option when trying to level up or build some wealth. It's not nearly as difficult as you would think. That's my final word. About you.
Oh, about seller financing.
Anything.
Oh, about anything.
Yeah.
I think keeping your job and investing is probably the easiest way to mitigate this risk, because you don't need the money the day it comes in. You have access to it, but you don't necessarily need it. And separate from that, because I know a lot of people find having partners and other people pay for stuff as a really sexy topic, right? You didn't have to come out of your own pocket. If you are not willing to put your own money down for property, then you should not be willing to risk other people's money. And you should have some experience before you go out and take other people's life savings and take other people's hard-earned money to do stuff with. I only started using my family's money and using other people's money for flips 5 years into the game. So I had a track record that was like stellar going into it, but it was my money that was on the line first. And then even so, when I offer to people, they have pretty much guaranteed money because I have it in the bank in case I mess up. So this is accessible, the most accessible if you can keep your job, but also please do not take other people's money without knowing what you're doing or having a track record to prove it.
POP, it's called proof of performance. She had POP before she did it. Well said.
Start small your first time if you're going to do it.
Yeah.
And I think this is a very accessible thing if you're willing to invest the time, do the effort.
Take a risk.
Take a risk and understand that your first steps are not glamorous and huge.
Yeah.
You know, we're talking about your apartment building today. That's not what we were talking about 6 years ago.
Yeah.
We were talking about a place you could afford with a basement you could fix up to put a renter in. So there's steps to this, and you're probably not at step 5 if you're listening to this and you're really interested at it. You don't have to be super smart. Just remember you're not specially lucky. And so we want a good plan with flexibility, with good consultants along the way.
Well said. Very well said. We will archive this on the website, ilovecville.com. I want to do this again. I freaking love you guys. I freaking love this topic, if you can't tell. I'll give you a dap.
Thank you.
You too. Guys, this is just what we're trying to do here. We're trying to bring approachable content and put it on all social platforms possible so you could potentially learn from trials and tribulations, which I'm sure we have all had many, 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 many of. Tomorrow's program, we're interviewing Matt Harmony, who's the founder of a winery brand that he's launching from an e-commerce standpoint. So his entire business model is do wine direct to the consumer to make the price point more affordable and potentially fatten his margin. Matt Harmony on tomorrow's show. And then on Friday, Detective Mike Wells of Albemarle County to discuss what it's like to be an Albemarle County police officer and head of the police union in this area. That's the I Love CVille Show. My friends, thank you kindly for joining us on a Wednesday. Take care.
Thank you.
Good job. Excellent work, per usual. Excellent work. Good job, good job, good job. Was that fun?
It was.